Hello, and welcome to Data Practices Office Presents Safe at Home for Law Enforcement. We're so happy that you could join us today. My name is Taya Moxley-Goldsmith with the Data Practices Office. And as you know, we are a statewide resource on data practices in the open meeting law, and we spend most of our time responding to questions and providing training on those laws. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions that you might have. This is what we plan to do with our time together today. I'll be handing it over shortly, but wanted to note that the slides for this presentation are on the website, on the DPO website where you registered, and will be available there. They're there now, and they will be available. And then the recording of this presentation will be on our YouTube channel probably later this week. And at the end of the presentation, there's a slide with all the URLs and where you can find all these things as well. So you don't have to necessarily remember that right now. So we are very excited and fortunate to have the team from the Safe at Home Address Confidentiality Services with us today from the Secretary of State's office. We are going to save some time at the end of the presentation for questions, and we are using the Q&A panel. So if you have questions at any time, you can put them in the Q&A panel, and we'll pose those questions to the Safe at Home team. I'm going to turn it over to Diana for introductions, and I am going to move the presentation over. So Diana, you should be able to move the slide.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having us speak today. My name is Diana Umadan, and I'm the director for Safe at Home, and I've been the director since Safe at Home started in 2007. So have seen it grow and change over the years. And with our office also on today, we have Mike Buchanan, who is the Deputy Director of Safe at Home, and also Alyssa Schacht, who is our Communications Coordinator. To give you an idea of their roles with Safe at Home, Mike supervises our mail unit. I'll talk a little bit about that in our presentation, and then also our participant administration unit. And then also has also supervises the absentee voting, which I'll touch on in the very, very end. But he does answer policy questions, procedural questions, and things like that, fields calls from law enforcement. So that is Mike's role, and Mike can wave to. And then Alyssa is our communications coordinator, does a lot of outreach and does a lot of training, also provides a lot of training to law enforcement and does a lot of training to law enforcement. And so if you are interested in having a specific training, please contact our office, and Alyssa would be the one that could help you out with that. I also want to mention that also either on now or soon to be on will be the General Counsel, B.B. Black, for the Office of the Minnesota Secretary of State, and then also the Deputy Counsel, Justin Erickson. When we get to the end, when we have Q&A, it is possible that they would be the more appropriate person to respond to your question. So I'm happy to have them on and listening as well. So the main legal governance for Safe at Home is Minnesota Statutes Chapter 5B, and then there's also a Data Practices section, main section, which is 13.045. It's also governed by Administrative Rules, Chapter 8290. There are lots of other references throughout Minnesota statutes about Safe at Home, and our office does have a one-page document that we're happy to send to you. If you want to call us and ask for it or email us, we're happy to give that to you. It's kind of a handy little one-page tool. And sorry. When I give a presentation about Safe at Home, I usually like to start with helping people understand and kind of do away with some misperceptions of what Safe at Home actually is. So that's where I like to start. Some people have a lot of there are some things that are not true. So some people have some misunderstandings of what Safe at Home actually is. Some people say Safe at Home is a witness protection program. It is not a witness protection program. It is a service that does help protect witnesses, but it is not the witness protection program like we associate and hear about in the movies. Safe at Home is also not a resource to find and provide housing for people. I think sometimes that's just thought, people think it is because of the name Safe at Home, but we do not do that. Our office does not do that. Every once in a while, not so much anymore, more so in the beginning, but sometimes people say Safe at Home issues fake addresses. We do not issue a fake address. Our office issues a post office box address. I'll talk more about that in a minute. It is actually it's a real PO box address. It is an alternate address, also referred to as a designated address. It is not fake. It actually is real. We actually have a key for it. You can go and see it. So it is a special PO box address. And sometimes people think that staff at our office are actual victim advocates in the traditional sense of the word. We are not. We are not sexual violence advocates or domestic violence advocates in the traditional sense of the word. We do help people understand how they can navigate and use their Safe at Home address. It's just a different type of advocacy. So what is true is Safe at Home is a division of the Minnesota Secretary of State's office. We provide address confidentiality services. There are a lot of different things that our office does. And it is a tool for someone with very, very extreme safety needs, not just someone who wants privacy, but someone that has very extreme safety needs and needs to keep their location unknown to the people that they're afraid of. Meaning that if the people that they're afraid of or person they're afraid of finds their location, there is a very, very high likely that there will be physical harm or someone will kill them. And as I said, Safe at Home issues a special post office box address that others are required by law to accept and use. And again, it is a service administered by the Office of the Secretary of State. So who does Safe at Home help? Well, it's a tool for people to help themselves. We do ask people on the application why they are applying to Safe at Home. They're not required to answer that on the application. Most people do. It's self-reported victimization data. We've been tracking it since year 2 of Safe at Home, and consistently over the years, the number one reason why people apply to Safe at Home is because of domestic violence. It's well over 80% consistently. The second most common reason is stalking. And then the third most common reason is sexual assault. I would say during the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a huge increase in people applying because they have safety needs because of their profession. And I like to stress that too, that is something that it's important for people to understand. People are enrolled in Safe at Home for a wide variety of reasons. And as I just said, professional safety concerns is something that we see people enrolling for, and that's increasing. We have a large number of law enforcement officials in Safe at Home, prosecutors, judges, victim advocates themselves. So it is anyone who has a safety concern and resides in Minnesota is eligible for Safe at Home. Every single day, people enroll and then they're canceled or they withdraw from Safe at Home. So the number fluctuates on a daily basis. Our current number of participants is over 4,200, and that's about 2,000 households. However, we serve many more people than that every year, and that just continues to increase. This year, it should be probably just over 6,000 people. And because of that, and that's because people go in and out, every single day. So we serve more people than are actually in. Application assistants are victim advocates with whom we partner that help with the application process. We have over 300 of those all throughout the state. Every single county in the state of Minnesota has someone who can help somebody else apply to Safe at Home. So how does Safe at Home work? Well, a participant, so somebody who's newly enrolled in Safe at Home, we also refer to that as being certified. So they're enrolled in Safe at Home and they're issued an alternate address. It's a PO box address. that all private and public entities in the state of Minnesota or doing business in the state of Minnesota must accept as that person's legal, physical, and mailing address. It is their address for all purposes. And when the person, the participant uses that alternate address for everything, that helps to keep their real address unknown and inaccessible to the person that they fear. So it is a tool, and it's a tool that's as effective as they use the address for everything. So if they're really not using the address for everything, and honestly, we do have a very small number of participants who probably we know don't use the Safe at Home services effectively. What ends up happening is that they typically end up being canceled or withdraw, and then very often they reapply later after having learned that, oh, I really should have used my Safe at Home address for everything, and that would have worked more effectively. But our office assigns them an alternate address that by law, as I said, must be accepted as the participant's home address. They can also use it as their work or their school address. We see that less frequently. Everybody uses it as their home address, but by law, they can also use it as their work or school address. And if you think about it, home, work, and school, those are the three locations where people can typically be found. So that just makes sense. So as I said, by law, all public and private entities in the state of Minnesota must accept that address, and they're prohibited from requiring that a participant provide their real address along with their assigned Safe at Home address. So what that means is that it is only the assigned Safe at Home address that must be accepted. It's not that it's accepted as a mailing address and then they also disclose their real address. No, it's that is the only address that is accepted. And requiring someone to also disclose their real address is prohibited by law. I also want to add that Minnesota was the first state when when Safe at Home began in 2007. Minnesota was the first state to extend their address confidentiality services to the private sector. At that time, there were probably about, I think about a dozen other states that had address confidentiality programs. Those laws only extended to the public sector and not to the private sector. So when Minnesota designed its laws many years ago and started services, we said, you know what, as Minnesota often does, we want to go beyond that and we want to make sure people are really, really safe. And we're going to extend our laws to the private sector as well and require private companies and private entities to comply with the laws as well. And now there are probably about 40 states and Washington, D.C. that have address confidentiality programs. Eligibility for Safe at Home is really pretty simple. Someone has to actually reside in Minnesota, and they have to be afraid for their personal safety, for their physical personal safety, or they have to reside with somebody else who fears for their safety. And that's really it. This isn't an eligibility, but more of an ineligibility factor. Someone who is a registered predatory offender is not eligible for Safe at Home. I mentioned earlier about application assistants. Application assistants are professional victim advocates who voluntarily partner with our office. When people apply to Safe at Home, they must do that with the help of an application assistant. So that's a victim advocate who's been trained by our office to help with the application process. It does require a face-to-face meeting. They have to sit down, talk about the safety concerns, what's going on. It's highly likely and very common for someone to already be working with a victim advocate because of an OFB or some type of court proceeding or something like that, or someone who's just trained to relocate and escape a very violent and unhealthy relationship. And so through the process of that victim advocate helping that person, they may, the subject of safe at home may come up. So the victim advocate may say to them, hey, have you heard of safe at home? This may be a good thing for you to do, and it may be a good part of your safety plan. And that's a really important thing that the victim advocate does with the person is they sit down, they talk about what the person should and probably should not be doing. They design a very unique safety plan based on that person's situation. And many times applying to safe at home is a part of that safety plan. So it's really a mutual decision that they arrive at together, that applying to safe at home is a good step for that person to take. And we have, as I said, every county in the state it has coverage. We have about 150 application locations statewide. So we have really good coverage throughout the state. Someone does not have to go too far to find an application assistant to help them do a safety plan and to apply to safe at home. So in essence, the application assistant does some, I don't like to use the word screening, I just have to think of a better word for it, but they kind of do, they screen. Not everyone is a good candidate for safe at home. For example, somebody who has lived at any location for any significant length of time and has no plans of moving is not a good candidate for safe at home. Relocating is always a requirement, not in law really, but a requirement in that safe at home won't work if someone does not relocate and find a new address. And it's that new address, that new location is what's kept private and confidential. Just want to point out that there is only one safe at home address. It's a PO box address in St. Paul. Doesn't matter where the participant lives throughout the state, doesn't matter. There's only one safe at home address, and it's a post office box in St. Paul. This is the safe at home PO box. It's PO box 17370 in St. Paul. This is what a safe at home address looks like. I'll talk about the lot number in a second. But if you're interacting with somebody who says that they're in safe at home and they have a PO box in Minneapolis or Rochester, that's not it. There's only one safe at home PO box address. That is the PO box address that you are required by law to accept and use. Because all of the participants share the same post office box address, it's really important to be able to differentiate one household from another. So we assign lot numbers. So each household will have a distinct and unique lot number that's different from everybody else, and we don't recycle them. That lot number is theirs forever. Should they withdraw and then decide to re-enroll later, they would be assigned the same lot number. And sometimes even how adult participants in the same household are assigned different lot numbers. And that's just because sometimes the adults will then not reside together, but still remain in safe at home. And that's just for ease of record keeping and things. If you send something to a safe at home participant, if you mail them something, or want to serve them legal documents, it's incomplete unless you have the lot number. The lot number is extremely, extremely important. We have numerous people in Safe at Home with the same name. We have numerous people in Safe at Home that have a name that is maybe one letter different from somebody else's name. So it's very important to include the lot number. If you mail something to someone and you do not include the lot number, it will be returned to you. The name is also required if you're mailing something to someone. We need the name and the lot number. That helps us ensure that we are sending the mail to the correct person. We also have quite a few instances, I'd say quite a few, but I think of probably 10 or 12 instances of where, and we could have more maybe, but instances of where we have both the alleged victim and the alleged offender in Safe at Home. We don't do fact finding when we, when we get an application, as long as everything is complete on the application, we are required by law to certify that person and enroll that person in Safe at Home. So all the more reason why having a name and a lot number is extremely important when you're mailing something to someone. We want to make sure that we're not sending something to someone that we shouldn't. So it's very important. By law, senders are required to send a participant's mail to them using the assigned Safe at Home post office box address, even if the sender believes that they know or does know the real address of the participant. Mail is still required to go to them, be sent to them using their Safe at Home PO box address. Mail is an important part of what we do here at Safe at Home. If a person is using Safe at Home effectively, all of their mail gets to them by going through Safe at Home first. No mail should be going to them directly at their home. Our office forwards first class mail. We do not forward junk mail or periodicals. It's too cost prohibitive. We do not do that. But it comes into our office. We put it in a brown envelope. We do know what their real address is, and that's the deal. They're afforded and legally, have the ability to use their Safe at Home address for everything, but they are also required to keep us updated and knowledgeable of what their current physical address is at all times. So their mail comes to them through the Safe at Home PO box address. We put it in a brown envelope and then put an address label on it, and it goes back out into the USPS mail stream. And the mail that they're receiving at their home is mail that we don't open their mail, but they open the brown envelope, and that's their mail that we have forwarded to them at their house. If they're using Safe at Home correctly, as I said, the only mail that they're getting at their home is mail that's arriving there in a brown envelope that we've sent. We process about 1 million pieces of mail annually. And so we do have a mail team, which I mentioned in the beginning. Mike is the supervisor of the mail team, and we have a pretty large mail room with some sophisticated mail stations connected to our internal database. So mail is received daily and processed by the Safe at Home staff. And as again, what that means is it's put in a brown envelope and then sent back out to them. We do send on to them their first class mail. No packages. We give them lots of other ideas for how they can receive packages in a safe manner. And then also, what they need to think about if they choose to go with another option. For example, if they do choose to open up a private PO box for things that they order online or something like that, we also just want to make sure that they're aware of, if the person you're afraid of learns of what that address is, they could sit and wait for you to come there and pick up your package. So everyone has to make their own decisions. We just offer the information to them. We don't forward packages, but an exception would be packages sent by a federal, state, or county government office. And then also medicines. We do have a fair amount of people that get their medicines through the mail, and that is acceptable. Status changes. As I mentioned, on a daily basis, people are enrolled and then they exit the program. People can withdraw at any time. It's completely voluntary to be in Safe at Home. More often, though, we see that people are canceled. We do cancel people every single day. The most common reason why people are canceled from Safe at Home is that they did not update our office with their new address. After that, the more common reasons would be they changed their legal name and didn't update us, or they changed their phone number and didn't update us. We don't require that they have a phone, but we do require that we have a phone number on file so that we can contact them for various reasons. For example, if their mail becomes undeliverable and we need to resolve that so they're not canceled. Aside from a participant's name and assigned Safe at Home address, all Safe at Home data is classified as private data. Our private data, all data is kept on a secure network within the Safe at Home office, and it's completely inaccessible outside of Safe at Home. So everything is private data. The only thing that's not, and the only thing that's public, is the participant's name and their assigned Safe at Home address. What our office can do is we can tell you whether someone is an active participant if you provide a name and a lot number, or a name and a date of birth. And if you provide a name and a date of birth and they are an active participant, because the lot number is public data, we can then tell you the lot number. Other than that, we can't share any other information with you. So if you're interacting with someone and they say that they're in Safe at Home, but they were never assigned a lot number, that's not true. every single person is assigned a lot number. And that is a very important part of their address. So by law, a participant cannot be required to disclose his or her real address for anything. In fact, there are so very few exceptions that we just tell participants, if you are ever told that you need to disclose your real address for this, please call our office. It includes driver's license, automobile and renter's insurance. Their employer has to accept it. Law enforcement has to accept it. There are even some federal exceptions to that. So, for example, there's a FinCEN ruling with the Department of Treasury where when they open a bank account, they do not have to disclose their real address. So we always encourage them to call our office beforehand. And let's see, looking for another slide here. Sorry. So if law enforcement needs an actual address, there are actually two options. One is that law enforcement can get a court order requiring their participant to disclose, or we do have a procedure, we call it the BCA procedure. There's a procedure through the BCA where law enforcement can make a request by calling the duty officer line and saying that there's a law enforcement emergency. It has to be an emergency, and that typically it's an address of the safe at home participant is needed for a certain reason. The BCA will ask a bunch of questions. They have a form that they fill out, and then they'll let our office know that there's been a request made. And then we get that information, and we assess the situation, and we do have the discretion to not disclose. So we do try to get a little bit more information. This actually just happened. The last time was maybe about a month ago. And we did talk through the situation, and we want to cooperate, obviously, as much as possible. And so it's a very important decision that our office has to make when we do disclose an address. So we did ask the law enforcement official for a little bit more information, acknowledging that you obviously can't tell us all the details, but can you give us a little bit more information so that we can make a good decision here? And we had a very good conversation. And in that instance, we did decide that it was necessary to disclose the address for what was going on. But we do have the discretion, to say no. And there have been times where we have said no, we cannot disclose that real address. So when law enforcement is interacting with a safe at home participant, it really, as you can imagine, sometimes a participant will, get nervous. They're talking to a police officer or a law enforcement official. They feel a little pressured. They may decide to offer up their real address. It's better to just stop and just discourage them from telling their real address, and just acknowledging that, no, I understand, I'm to accept only your safe at home address. It should be on their driver's license. When you ask to see their driver's license, it is their legal address. We tell people when they are certified and safe at home, you should, you need to go and update your driver's license or a state ID card and have your legal address put on there. So if you see that and they tell you they're in safe at home, you can go ahead and, and they start to tell you their real address, just kind of, you can put your hand up and just say, no, you're in safe at home. All I need is your safe at home address. It will minimize complications later, because if they do end up telling you their address, they're just going to call our office, and sometimes they're crying, sometimes they're really upset. And what we'll do is we'll talk through what happened with them, and very often we'll provide to them what's called a notice to government entity form, that they would turn around and provide your office, which then prohibits certain information. Typically it's location that they're worried about, from being shared. There are only certain limited exceptions for the sharing. So it is better just to, as I said, understand that only, accepting only the safe at home address is required under law, and that is the only address that should be accepted. Service of process. So when people are certified and safe at home, our office becomes their agent for mail. What that means is we do accept certified mail and can sign for mail on their behalf. We could ultimately open their mail if we want to, but we don't do that. But we are their agent for mail, and we are their agent for service of process. So if a participant needs to be served, we accept, typically that service is through certified mail, and we also accept personal service. There are directions on our website for that. When we accept service for a participant, and they do have to be an active participant, we verify that before we accept the service. It's just the same as if it's in the hands of the participant. It's, you know, we're not going to dodge service. It's easy to serve them through us. If they're active, we will definitely accept that service for them. Our protocol here is to call them right away and to let them know that they have been served. And if they don't know what it's about, sometimes they'll ask us to open it and read it to them if there's a court date or something like that. So we do notify them right away that they have been served. Courts also have to accept a participant's safe at home address. If there's a court proceeding and someone feels as though a participant's real address is needed, there is a section of law in Chapter 5B. It's 5B.11. It's basically a legal analysis that a judge has to use to determine whether a participant's address does need to be disclosed. The judge could use that to determine that that address does not need to be, it's not needed, or the judge could walk through that and say, you know, in this instance, yes. So there is that. Going back to service, I also want to mention that if a participant has given what's called a notice to government entity, I showed that on the slide about a couple of minutes ago. If they have provided the government entity with that, if there is service after that, there is a law that says that once that has been given, if a participant is to be served, that service must happen, you know, through our office. So I just mentioned that because I know in previous presentations to law enforcement, you know, I've been posed with the question of, well, what if we do know the participant's real address? Why can't we just go and serve them there? Well, okay, people move. We know people move every day. People relocate and things like that, or, you know, and it's a lot easier to serve a participant through our office. That is the, you know, we're their agent. It's just a lot better practice to just serve them through our office. So what I added also, Taya forwarded me some questions that their office had received from some law enforcement offices and sheriff's offices and police offices, I believe, police departments. And so I included those questions in this PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go ahead and I'll walk through those. I imagine there'll be some questions at the end in the Q&A, and that's just fine. I expect that, but I'll go ahead and give you what our initial responses are to those questions. So the first question was identity and location data, and I actually just wrote these almost word for word. Identity and location data, which is referenced in 13.045, and this is taken right out of that section. It says identity and location data not otherwise classified by law, and that's taken right from the statute, are private data. And somebody wants to know how this interplays with specifically with comprehensive law enforcement data under 13.82 subdivisions 2, 3, and 6. So what we're talking about here is arrest data. And hopefully I'm understanding what this question is really asking. So arrest data. Well, I know that it says under there that you have to, you know, that includes the person's name and address. Well, their address for all purposes is their safe at home address. that, you know, if they're arrested somewhere else, I guess, and then we're talking about the location of where they're arrested, you can be arrested anywhere. But if we're talking about the person who's arrested, their name and their address for all purposes, and that is by law, is their safe at home address. So that's the address that should be indicated. Request for service data. I think what we're talking about here is probably the written transcript for 911 calls. I guess I don't really have a great answer for that. I mean, I guess if someone's calling 911 from their home and then it's tied directly to their address, what they would do is they would end up calling our office, and this has happened a couple of times afterwards. We would provide them with a notice to government entity. Now, I think it probably would conflict with this because it expressly says that that is public data. So I don't know that there's a really great answer for that. Response or incident data, again, you would use the safe at home address. The participant's address by law is their safe at home address. So that is the address that should be on the incident report, and that should be in that record. Let's see, question number 2, due to the sensitive nature of safe at home participants' data, does Safe at Home have suggestions for what type of procedures government entities should have in place to confirm a participant's identity prior to disclosing private data to a data subject? So first of all, a government entity should not have the real address, should only have the Safe at Home address. So that's my first thought to that. Secondly, it really, that should be something that you consult with your responsible authority or data practices compliance official about. Together, you should determine what your processes should be to verify a data subject. That's just something that is a requirement under the Data Practices Act anyway, if you're talking about private data. And not knowing exactly how, you know, how your data is managed or what data you may have. It really depends on what's happening. I guess it also depends on, is the person coming in person? You could ask for a driver's license. I mean, there are different things that you could do. We can't really advise you of how you should go about that, but it is something that you should consider together and make those decisions together. Next question, what guidance does Safe at Home have if an entity inadvertently discloses identity and location data of a program participant? I think it depends on whether the participant provided a notice to government entity form. That's my first thought. But really, I guess my other initial thought is to follow the requirements of Chapter 13, because that's a data practices. There are certain requirements under the Data Practices Act. So again, consult with your responsible authority or data practices compliance official. If the thought there is that should we contact Safe at Home so they can contact the person, that's not really our place, because you do have requirements under the Data Practices Act where you do need to notify someone if there's been a breach. And hopefully I answered that, understanding what that question was. Hopefully I answered that okay. Question 4, do you have sample or model procedures to protect data from further disclosure as described in 13.045, subdivision 3C? I think what this is talking about is limited sharing after a participant provides a notice to government entity, which means that the data must be maintained as private data with limited sharing. Well, each organization must have procedures in place that will protect private data. And our office can't really advise another government office of how they can, how they should manage their data. So I don't mean to sound like I'm giving you the same answer, but I do think it's something that you do need to consult with your responsible authority about, your data practices compliance person. It really depends on who has access to your data, how they access your data, what data do they have access to. As I like to analyze a lot of things, when I'm trying to come up with an answer, many times I will just come up with a lot more questions. So if you have more questions about that, you can certainly ask that in the Q&A. Question 5, how should a participant notify a government entity that they are enrolled in Safe at Home? On a form prescribed by Secretary of State, I've heard of entities asking what to do when a participant verbally notifies them. Then they receive a request before getting any written notification. So participants are not required to notify people in writing that they're in Safe at Home. Giving an oral disclosure is fine. There's no legal requirement that they give you any kind of a, like, it's not a requirement to give a notice to government entity. It's not a requirement for them to write down their address or write you a letter. That's not a requirement. If you ask them for their address and they give you that PO box address and say they're in Safe at Home, they're in Safe at Home. Safe at Home participants are provided with a Safe at Home card. They are not legally required to carry it on their person. Most people do learn that it is very convenient to carry it in their wallet or in their purse. Even small children, everyone is given a Safe at Home card. So if you interact with someone and they say I'm in Safe at Home, well, they never gave me a card. Again, that's not true. Everybody gets a card. It's not a legal form of ID and it does not have their picture on it, but it does have their Safe at Home address. It has their name. It has their date of birth. It also has their expiration date of their participation. People are certified for 4 years. They can renew at the end of 4 years. So they do have that card. You can always ask to see the card. Again, they're not required to keep it on their person, but presentation of the card does create a rebuttable presumption that enrollment is valid. And again, if you should ever question that, you can always call our office and verify whether someone is an active participant or not. Again, you do that by giving us the name and the lot number or name and a date of birth. Question 6, what happens when a participant provides you with their actual address but says in a letter that they are a participant? I'm not exactly sure what letter means in this instance. It might mean the form, like a notice to government entity form. First of all, going back to if you know they're in Safe at Home and they start to tell you their real address, stop, just say, have them stop and say, I don't need your real address, your Safe at Home address is enough. Afterwards, they may very well then provide you with a notice to government entity. There is a provision of law in 13.045 that does allow and permit a government entity to amend records to replace that with a participant's Safe at Home address. So that I just put that out there that there is that provision in there. Question number 7. Please provide advice on administering historical location data about past addresses. Safe at Home is not about discovering someone's, it's about discovering someone's current location. It's not about past locations. It's not about past addresses. And as I just want to remind you that typically when people enroll in Safe at Home, the only way for it to work is for people to relocate. So it's not about past addresses. Excuse me. So question 8, must law enforcement agencies redact Safe at Home participant data after receiving notification of certification when disclosing data to a prosecutor's office or to the courts as part of a prosecution when the participant is a witness? If not, any guidance on how to alert prosecutor or court that data involves a program participant. Did I just see that somebody did answer this question? Is that the note that I got, Casey?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just answering a different note. Nope, go ahead with this question.
That's okay. Sorry.
Yep.
So you should use the participant's Safe at Home address. Court documents must indicate the participant's Safe at Home address. If the true address is needed, a judge uses the analysis, as I mentioned earlier, under section 5B.11. And then I also just wanted to mention what I just mentioned previously too is, and this is taken out of 13.045 subdivision 3E, notwithstanding sections, I don't have to read it all for you, but a government entity may amend records to replace a participant's address with their Safe at Home address. I think our general counsel and deputy general counsel may have more to say about that if people have further questions in the Q&A. I did talk to Justin about that a little bit yesterday. So a couple of things, and I'm wrapping up here, and I'm sorry if it feels like I'm going really fast. This is a lot of information to cover, but I do want to leave enough time for questions and answers. Participant verification. Again, we are able to verify participation if we're given a potential participant's name and lot number or name and date of birth. We can certainly do that for you. And again, I felt like I went through that really quickly. There's a lot of stuff to cover, but I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for questions and answers because I do anticipate some.
Thank you, Diana. I'm just going to
Yep.
quick take this over here to be the presenter. So I've already seen a lot of good questions come in, and just so you know, if we don't get to your question today, we'll try to collect them and follow up with you after the webinar. We'll do the best we can. So again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A panel as we go. The slides, again, here's where you can find them. They're there now. They'll be up there. We will have a recording available. I'm also going to open up the evaluation in the polling panel. So as you're listening to answers or asking your questions, you can fill out the poll and let us know how this webinar was. If you have any suggestions, especially for folks we should talk to for another DPO Presents, we're interested in your thoughts, so let us know. If you hear some silence, it's just us going through the questions and vetting them and getting them ready to ask to Diana. And I'm happy to pull Phoebe and Justin up if there are questions that it makes sense to bring them up into the panel as well. So we're going to take a look at the questions now, and
Okay, I can hop in here. There's been a couple of questions about applying for gun permits specifically. Statute requires home addresses on gun permit applications. Also states that the party applying for a permit must apply at the jurisdiction of their home address, the sheriff's office where their home address is. So questions are, where do Safe at Home participants apply for gun permits, or similarly, how does an office verify that the applicant actually lives within the jurisdiction that they're applying?
Yeah, well, much like county-based services through community services or something like that, a participant self-discloses the county that they reside in. They are required, we do tell them that they need to apply for those permits through the county of residence where they actually do reside. On the permit card and on the application, they do use their Safe at Home address. That is their address for all purposes, but they must apply for that through the county where they do reside.
I have a more practical question from somebody who's asking about whether an application can be done virtually with a live video meeting, or must it be done in person?
That's a great question. Right now, it does have to be done in person because the application assistant has to sign, and the applicant does need to sign in the presence of the application assistant. But we will be doing some rulemaking later this year, and we do have plans to change that application process so that we can accommodate situations like that.
What about service of process, which says, if a person is not active in Safe at Home and service of process is attempted, will the current address of the former participant be provided?
No, it's private data.
Thank you. Scrolling.
We've had a couple questions regarding law enforcement data when there's a Safe at Home participant, but maybe the location of the arrest or the location of the incident is also at their home address. So what if the location of the arrest is their residence? Then they would be listing their home address as the location of the arrest and the listed address as the Safe at Home address.
I'm gonna, Justin or Bibi, would you like to explain this one?
I'm going to try to bring them up here.
Thanks. My initial, answer is that any address associated with the participant and their address is their safe at home address. But I want to see if they want to elaborate a little bit more.
Sure.
Well, without having researched that, my knee-jerk reaction is that you'd have to list the safe at home address in any public report. The home address is private data. And I realize that it's the arresting address, but I think you would have to, if there were any disclosures in the police report or whatever, there'd have to be some separate sequestered document that said the arrest took place at X. And maybe the police report wouldn't mention an address at all, or would mention an address that was redacted, and then that would be the tip off. I think that would be a tip off that someone's in safe at home, but you're going to list the safe at home address anyway as the address of the arrested person. So that, without going in depth, Justin, did you have a thought on that?
No, I think I largely agree with that. And again, something I would certainly want to look into more, but that's my knee-jerk reaction as well.
Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of questions about the program itself. How is the program funded? Are there costs to participants or government entities? And then similarly, how does one discontinue participation in the Safe at Home program?
Yeah, people discontinue participation. They can voluntarily withdraw at any time, and they get canceled if they don't keep us updated. They can also get canceled if they choose not to renew. So it expires. So that's how they discontinue their participation. It's funded through the budget of the Secretary of State's office. There are no fees charged to participants, to be in Safe at Home. Obviously, there's a cost to run the division, but there is no cost, extended to people to participate.
And the funding is from the general fund. We get an appropriation from the legislature that includes the costs of Safe at Home. The biggest cost, I suppose, is salaries and postage.
Correct.
We have a timely question here from a city clerk who's said, I've turned away, this is not necessarily a law enforcement question, but a good one about voting. I've turned away a couple participants trying to vote at City Hall because it would disclose their real address. Was that you don't have to say it, and was it the correct action, but what should folks do in terms of voting with a Safe at Home participant?
And that's one thing I'm sorry, I wanted to mention at the end. So Safe at Home participants vote by absentee ballot through the Safe at Home office. We have a whole elections division. So it's all done. It's absentee through the mail. There is no process for participants to vote at their local polling place, and not without disclosing their real address. So the best way for them to vote is through Safe at Home. The first address confidentiality program started in Washington State in the early 1990s, and it was because of voting records. A woman had written the Secretary of State at the time there and said, she was found, her abusive ex-husband found her through voting records. And she said, I don't feel like I should have to choose between voting and staying safe. And that's how they designed the first address confidentiality program. But our participants vote by absentee ballot through the mail, through our office only.
And this one is from a law enforcement agency that says that they often find out through dispatch that the location is a Safe at Home location, maybe a real location of a Safe at Home participant. Do you know how that information is usually found out by dispatch? A technical question.
Not exactly. I guess I'd like to have a further conversation. I mean, I've talked to some dispatch. It's been several years, but probably, the participant, if you're talking about how that would play out, I imagine maybe the participant said it at some point and just had a concern because somebody was coming to the house. Is that kind of where you're going with that question?
I'm not sure. Yes,
Well,
she said yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's
and
probably.
and I would say, Diana, I want to make the point, dispatch doesn't have access to our records or database, so that is completely insulated.
Right.
And
Right.
so there is a
Right.
process, of course, for obtaining information through the BCA if there's a law enforcement inquiry, but that couldn't possibly happen in the time
No.
that somebody's on the way to a location.
Yeah, the only way, you're right. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. The only way that they would know that is that the person said that. Even if someone were to dial 911, you know, and had a landline from their home, it doesn't show up on, you know, on the other.
Oh, Diana, I think you froze.
What?
Okay, you're back now. Sorry. Whenever someone
okay.
freezes, we're always trying to figure out who it is, but you're back now. So
You might want to
Okay.
repeat the last part of your comment.
I was talking about 911. I said even if a person dials 911 and they have a landline from their home, it's not that the person on the other end doesn't see this, you know, safe at home participant. This is their house, you know, that the only way someone would know is if the participant disclosed that they were in safe at home. That's how that would be learned.
I have a practical question for participants. Do participants get notified when they're coming up for renewal? And if they forget to renew when they're wanting to keep it being in safe at home, does their address become public again for that short time when they haven't renewed and they maybe missed that date?
It's possible. So we notify them about at least 60 days before renewal. And then we let them know again 30 days if we haven't received it. And then, I mean, numerous times before renewal, we let them know that it's going to expire. So if they do let it expire, they have to reapply. And it is possible that, you know, depending on how long it takes for them to reapply and what they needed to do and what their interactions were, it is possible that they had to disclose their real address to someone in between. Usually people that go, oops, I missed it, because we'll send them right away, you know, you've been canceled because you didn't renew. And so usually it's just a matter of days before they go ahead and they reapply. So it's not that long. People who own real property, and that's a whole nother presentation on November 15th. People in Safe at Home can purchase a home, and there are laws in place that can have everything privatized in the public side and in the private sector. But if they do not renew within 90 days, those property records go public. But that's another presentation, but that could happen.
So we did get another question about participants. So is the fact that someone is a participant in Safe at Home considered private or confidential? For an example, a report that mentions a data subject is in the Safe at Home program. So maybe not necessarily the address, but just the fact they're a participant.
With our office, no. The fact that somebody is in Safe at Home, because their name and assigned address is public information. Now, I guess I can't speak to another other government records, because there may, I mean, I don't, and here's where I'm going to lean on our attorneys to answer this question again. But if there are a different classification for other records that another government entity may have, that's different. But I can tell you, according to our office, the fact that they're in Safe at Home is not private data. And that's the nature of the program, really, is that they can use this other assigned address for everything, and that's their public address. And Justin or BB, did you want to answer that?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head that your local jurisdiction may have data classifications that we don't know about, and that you'll have to comply with that too.
That will be the last word. Thank you so much for being with us today, Diana and Alyssa and Mike. And thank you so much to BB and Justin for hopping in here at the end. We really appreciate your time and being here to talk about this. As Diana mentioned, we will be having another webinar on Safe at Home, but angled more towards property records. And so it will be in a couple weeks. Same bat time, same bat station. We will collect any other questions that we have and try to follow up with you later. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here today. And we really appreciate your time. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.